Hello everyone! Well, we don't know the details. Safe to say that the Sunwell is going to play a part going forwards. Not just hinted at with the key art, but also mentioned by Madsen during the World Soul Saga presentation. But what exactly is it? What is its story? That is what we're going to explore.
Remember the Sunwell.
The story of the Sunwell begins as most good stories in Warcraft do, with the Titans and the Old Gods. The Old Gods had infected Azeroth and burrowed their tendrils deep to corrupt the world so inside. The Titans found the planet corrupted, and they wanted to help nurture that soul inside, but first, that meant that they had to get rid of the Old Gods. But they kinda feared that their epic titanic might, they would do more harm to the world than good. Sure enough, they might be able to one-shot the Old Gods, but what would that mean for the soul inside? So, they made their Titan Keepers, and in turn their Titan Forged, and they were going to wage their battle over the sake of the world. But taking on the old god Y'Shaarj was no easy feat. Their titanic forces were about to be overwhelmed, so Aman'Thul reached down, ripped out Y'Shaarj anyways, destroying the old god, but doing exactly what they had feared would happen. He had inadvertently ripped an eternal wound in Azeroth's surface. Volatile, arcane energies, the lifeblood of the nascent Titan, or as they call it now, the Prime World Soul, erupted from the scar and roiled out across the world. A constant stream of volatile, arcane energy bled from the colossal rifts. The Keepers knew that if left unattended, these energies would consume Azeroth over time, so they labored day and night, crafted magical wards around the gaping wounds to staunch off the escaping lifeblood. Eventually, the tumultuous energies calmed and settled into balance. All that remained of the scar was an immense lake of scintillating energy that the Keepers would call the Well of Eternity. Thereafter, the power of this wondrous fount would be infused in the ailing world, helping life to take roots and bloom across the globe. You might recall seeing the wonders of Unguro and Sholazar Basin, or the magics of the Veil of Eternal Blossoms, creating some of the most fertile lands that you've ever seen with the runoffs in the Valley of the Four Winds, but also giving birth to some incredible evolutions, like the Dark Trolls, that found their way to the Well of Eternity, and over generations, they became the Night Elves. Highly intelligent, virtually immortal, the tribe's mystics began worshipping the moon goddess Elune, who they believed was bound to the Well of Eternity itself. They claimed that the deity slumbered within the fount's depths during the day, and the former trolls also discovered the name Kalimdor, uttered hide-the-forged words from communing with Elune, and investigating strange artifacts around the well's periphery. Safe to say, this magical fount of power, this incredible source of arcane might, became vital for their society. Drawing power from it and wield such magics that shook empires to their core, and who better to rule such a vast, mighty empire than Azshara, Light of Lights, highborn queen of the Night Elves, who nearly brought the dark Titan Sargeras into the world by turning the well into a massive portal which brought in the Burning Legion. The War of the Ancients, they call it. We might have talked about it once or twice, where thankfully the world of Azeroth was able to stop her plans. Save the day, but not without a price. The magics upon the well, like using the Dragon Soul to first make the portal more powerful and then reversing it all, it made the well incredibly unstable. The sundering of the land split Kalimdor apart, with the Maelstrom dab in the middle, as an eternal reminder of the well. But moments before that, Illidan Stormrage did something that was unheard of in Night Elf society.
Illidan, what is in that vial? What are you doing?
Wait, I have an idea. What our people could not. Yes, I can feel the raw power of the Well of Eternity! It is time to end this charade!
Malfurion, he has done it! The portal is collapsing!
No! No!
This victory will not be ripped from my grasp. I will not return to him in failure. I will not be torn from this pitiful world. No. No!
Arthurian.
Hush, Tyrande. Where is Illidan?
By the very edge.
Brother, a timely arrival.
Illidan! The well is out of control!
Aye. It's been twisted and turned by too many spells. The fuss we, especially you, made with the portal was too much. The same spell that sent the Burning Legion back into their foul realm now works on the well. It's devouring itself and taking its surroundings with it. Fascinating, isn't it?
Not if we're caught up in it. Why weren't you running? What have you been doing with your hand in the well?
He had grabbed waters from their sacred well and used it to empower himself, with several filled vials still in his person. Using some of those, he created a brand new well, knowing that Sargeras and the Legion were not vanquished. We merely held them back. They would be back one day, and when that happens, Azeroth had to be prepared.
You are not prepared.
Polluting one of the major water sources did not sit well with the other Night Elves. Not to mention that they had just fought a war over the original well. Imprisonment for Malfurion's twin brother. Life in jail, which in a cruel twist meant forever, as the Night Elves would become immortal, thanks to the blessings of the dragon aspects. In order to hide Illidan's new power source, they decided to plant the World Tree Nordrassil over it, and they blessed it so that the Night Elves would be better prepared and empowered to keep the world safe. Druidism became a big part of their culture now, but there were also those that could not let go of their arcane origin. People like Duframar Sunstrider that proclaimed that arcane power was their birthright of the Highborn, and that anyone who feared it was a coward. They practiced their arcane arts anyways, despite it being punishable by death. And murdering so many of them did not exactly sit right with the other Night Elves, so exile was going to be the way to go. Which, fair enough. If that was the price to pay, then the Highborn would go. But being exiled from their well did not come without its share of consequences. Aging and disease were serious problems. Their skins had even lost its violet hue, and they began to shrink in stature. Still, their expedition pressed on deep into the lands already inhabited by the Amani trolls, who did not take kindly to these invading elves, but once they found the perfect magical spot to set up base, Duframar revealed their secret weapon, a vial filled with waters from the original Well of Eternity, which he had managed to take from the custody of the Night Elves. He poured that vial into a small lake at the center of their magical nexus, and a brilliant fount of energy tore through the skies of Azeroth. The Highborn dubbed this glorious cradle of power the Sunwell, a name chosen in honor of Duframar and his bold quest to reignite their culture.
It was called the Sunwell, a sacred fount of untold power. It saturated every fiber of our being. In the warmth of its glow, we thrived.
Now going by the name High Elves, and embracing the strength of the sun over their traditional worship of the moon, the Sunwell and its powers, it again allowed them to build up a massive kingdom. Despite what the Amani might have wanted, magical defense, offense, growth and creation, Quel'thelas, or High Home, was a beauty to behold, and the now High Elves had a pretty sweet life here. A long life again, not quite immortality, but, close enough. It infused their kind. Similar to what we've seen with the Nightborn and the Nightwell, it infused their every fiber in such a way that their magical dependence on the well, it was passed on through their generations. Even their small children simply drinking their mother's milk, it made them addicted to the well. And while some High Elves have definitely shown that you can live without the Sunwell, it's no easy picnic. not an easy thing to do, so as you can imagine, losing the Sunwell would be devastating for their people.
Until the shadow of death fell upon us.
A tragedy that happened thousands of years after their founding, with the arrival of Prince Arthas and the Scourge, on the mission given to them by the Lich King, and the Lich King was pretending to work for Kil'jaeden and the Burning Legion. They needed the epic might of the Sunwell to resurrect Quel'thelas as a Lich. Invading the home of the High Elves was no easy feat though. Not even the might of the First Horde and the Red Dragon Riders, united with the Amani Trolls, had been able to accomplish that feat. However, betrayal from within, betrayal by a Darkan Drafir, it basically laid out the red carpet. Not to mention that fighting the Scourge meant that you brought your own enemy with you to the battlefield. The slain, their own kin, were resurrected and turned against them. The High Elves of Quel'thelas did everything in their power to halt the march of undeath, but with their own kin resurrected and thrown back at them, what could they possibly do?
Citizens of Silvermoon, I have given you ample opportunities to surrender, but you have stubbornly refused. Know that today, your entire race and your ancient heritage will end. Death itself has come to claim the high home of the elves. Now arise, Quel'thelas, and serve the Lich King once again.
As promised, the Lich King has granted me eternal life.
Riding off to whatever the Lich King whispered him to do next, Quel'thelas was left behind in ruins, with plenty of undead to cause them problems. Worse yet, this action had corrupted their Sunwell, their fount of power, the thing infusing them almost immediately after birth. What would the High Elves be without it? They'd soon find out though, as the necromantic corruption left behind, it was spreading to their people, it was spreading through their society. Left to fester, this would mean catastrophe. But they could blow it up. They could detonate the magical powers and take out not only the surrounding undead, but also the Amani that were trying to make use of their weakened states. Quel'thelas' plan worked. The day was saved, but what a sacrifice.
Only after the Sunwell's destruction did we realize how dependent we'd become upon its magic. How much we needed to feed. In the wake of our devastation, I named our people Cinderai, Blood Elves. My people turned to me for answers. I promised them a cure. Strangely, we found deliverance in the demon Illidan.
That same Illidan, once imprisoned and now released to fight the returned legion, just as he had foreseen. He did not offer Quel'thelas a direct, new, clean power source, even though we later find out that he did indeed create a new source within the Black Temple. Instead, he showed Quel'thelas and Romath ways on how they could draw magic out of beings and objects in order to sustain themselves. The Burning Crusade trailer has that full on in display, but there are more powers out there than just the arcane that they could drain. There are magics so delicious, one could lose themselves in it. Magic like Fel, where you could place arcane aligned with order. Fel would be chaotic and disorder. A more corruptive variation, but also extremely delicious and intoxicating. This is beautifully displayed in the story of Valera Sanguinar, a Blood Elf rogue who'd been fed the magical addiction through her mother's milk, and only became worse during her travels as she was forced to take in the arcane, and eventually the Fel as she was marked with the Dreadlords. It's a bit much to go into, but safe to say that Fel is incredibly addictive and corruptive. Not even their Prince Quel'thelas could resist the temptation, and that was a problem, as his allegiance would shift from his people, from Illidan, and instead he embraced the offers of Kil'jaeden and the Burning Legion. Ironic when you consider who was responsible for the corruption of their well, but blowing it up did not destroy the powers of the well itself. The fount's energies had actually scattered across the land, which was discovered by the Red Dragon Quel'thelas, who feared that all kinds of people with good intentions, bad intentions, they might show up and want to get their hands on this incredible power. He gathered the bits and pieces and decided to hide it away by transforming it into the form of a human girl, including memories of a whole lifetime, not even letting her know what she truly was. And Vina Teague, for all she and others knew, was just a human girl, and yet, the blue dragon Caligos, sent to investigate the destruction of the Sunwell, he could not help but be drawn to her magical nature. Their adventures together would reveal that Dark Under the Fear had returned, set on trying to claim the Sunwell once more, but realizing what she truly was. This little man stood little chance, and fun fact, it was Darkon's research that led to the birth of the Void Elves.
Power is to be wielded, not feared.
But more focused on the Sunwell, Lorfmar and the others promised to keep her hidden and safe. At first, they didn't even tell their prince, as they feared his desperation to save their people might push him into acting without considering the consequences. The elves did not know what would happen if the Avatar's power was infused into the site of the Sunwell. Quel'thelas was already a wounded nation. Another disaster might destroy it forever. But time made Lorfmar wonder if they'd made the right call. The time was approaching for Quel'thelas to come home. Being on Outland that long certainly wasn't good for him. Lorfmar believed that the only way that he could convince the prince to step through the portal again was to tell him about Envina. Messengers were sent out. Messengers that would never reach Quel'thelas, as Kil'jaeden had no desire for the prince to get this spark of hope. His agents had already infiltrated Lorfmar's inner circles, and they made damn sure that the prince stayed desperate and uncertain about the future, until he was firmly under Kil'jaeden's control. And he would be. After so very long being pressured, tempted and offered, he gave in to the deceiver. News would spread that the prince had pledged himself to the Legion, which some Blood Elves did not want to believe at first, but the truth was undeniable. The Horde made war on Quel'thelas and his followers, some of his own loyal subjects spilling his blood and ending his reign. But not his life. His demonic allies spirited him away and brought him back from the brink of death. Little was left of the elves' minds, and now he fully served Kil'jaeden.
The Sunwell's essence endured, kept hidden by those who sought to protect it. Now, I have returned with the knowledge that sacrifices must be made before we can reclaim our birthright. I have forged a new alliance. Soon, the blessed rays of the Sunwell will shine once again and usher into this world the one who will deliver us all.
Time for the deceiver to reveal Envina. Have the prince take her and leech away her power to reform the ruined Sunwell. A brilliant explosion of energy erupted from the fount, sparking it to life for the first time since the Third War. Quel'thelas fortified his ritual with energy from the mana cells that they'd gathered in Netherstorm, trying to bring in his brand new lords. A plan that obviously our Blood Elves were not down with. And now they had to rise up against the prince again, enter the Sunwell Plateau, and fight for their beloved source of power, to make sure that Azeroth would not fall into Kil'jaeden's hands. No Sargeras trying to come through the gate this time, it was just his right-hand man, but in their way stood something of their own doing. There was the Dark Naru Mu'uru. You see, the Blood Elves had figured out that not only could they siphon arcane, not only could they suck up the Fel, they could also take the light of a Naru. A gift sent to them by Quel'thelas when he had taken over Tempest Keep. A gift they happily embraced, if that meant reconnecting with the light. A light they had lost after the atrocities witnessed when Arthas ruined their kingdom. Ignoring the parts where draining Mu'uru had the Naru try to communicate. First in song, but then the tones within their head fractured into a screaming riot of noise, a sound of metal grinding against glass. Calling upon this source of light was completely different than it had been in the past. Some feared the noise would push them into madness, and yet they still did. These Blood Knights, draining the Naru so far that it entered its darkened state, as Narus can do. Leiliadrin and the others, they believed that this was all to help lead their people into a new age, but now, knowing what their prince had done, they realized their path was false. Yet the Naru Adal revealed that M'uru knew what was going to happen as it was prophesied. And so, now at darkest hour, redemption comes. A knightly lady sworn to blood. That still left Entropius to be conquered, its core collected by Velen. And we then proceed to try and stop Kil'jaeden.
The expendable have perished, so be it. Now I shall succeed where Sargeras could not. I will bleed this wretched world, and secure my place as the true master of the Burning Legion. The end has come. Let the unraveling of this world commence.
You are not alone. The blue dragonflight shall help you vanquish the deceiver. Anvina, I love you. Focus on my voice. Come back for me now. Only you can cleanse the Sunwell.
Kalik? Kalik?
Yes, Anvina. Let fate embrace you now.
The nightmare is over. The spell is broken. Goodbye, Kalik, my love.
The powers of the Sunwell turn against me. What have you done? What have you done?
Strike now, heroes, while he is weakened! Vanquish the deceiver!
Goodbye, Anvina, my love. Few will remember your name, yet this day you changed the course of destiny. What was once corrupt is now pure. Heroes, do not let her sacrifice be in vain.
Mortal heroes, your victory here today was foretold long ago. My brother's anguished cry of defeat will echo across the universe, bringing renewed hope to all those who still stand against the burning crusade. As the Legion's final defeat draws ever nearer, stand proud in the knowledge that you have saved worlds without number from the flame. Just as this day marks an ending, so too does it herald a new beginning. The creature Entropius, whom you were forced to destroy, was once the noble Naru, M'uru. In life, M'uru channeled vast energies of light and hope. For a time, a misguided few sought to steal those energies.
Our arrogance was unpardonable. We damned one of the most noble beings of all. We may never atone for this sin.
Then fortunate it is that I have reclaimed the noble Naru's spark from where it fell. Where faith dwells, hope is never lost, young blood elf.
Can it be?
Gaze now, mortals, upon the heart of M'uru. Unblemished, bathed by the light of creation, just as it was at the dawn. In time, the light and hope held within will rebirth more than this mere fount of power. Mayhap they will rebirth the soul of a nation.
Blessed ancestors, I feel it. So much love, so much grace. There are no words. Impossible to describe.
Salvation, young one. It waits for us all.
The Blood Elves were given another chance, no longer needing to feed upon sources of magic. They now have their Sunwell back, perhaps even better than before, as now it does not only contain the magical arcane powers, which were provided by the waters of the Well of Eternity, right, by the power of Azeroth. It also contains the core of a Naru, the light blessing them. This has had an effect on their people. All that fell business, it meant that the eyes turned green. Similar to what we've seen with the orcs, right? Drinking demonic blood or enduring long exposures to the fel, their skin turned green, reflecting the corruption of their people, and so too could we read this in the eyes of the Blood Elves. With a clean power source, over time that corruption would leave them, bringing back their high elven blue. And in some cases, the light started to shine through them. But what is interesting to consider is that a Naru, it does not just represent holy and light and salvation, as we'd see with, for example, forging Quel'thelas or the priests during Legion going to these holy grounds of the Sunwell to pick up a pure holy light for their campaign. It can also most definitely fall to the darkness and the void. The Sunwell can be corrupted, as we saw when Illyria Windrunner returned home from fighting with the army of the light against the might of the Legion. She's picked up void powers along the way, and while she wasn't on Azeroth when Quel'thelas blew up the Sunwell, or when their people embraced the path of the Blood Elves, she very much wanted to see their Sunwell again. Of course, the world has changed quite a bit since she called it home. Allegiances have changed, shifted, but she was still welcomed as a daughter of Quel'thelas, together with Phalistra of the Nightborn, who have their own Nightwell.
You doubt my words, yet how can we trust your own? Do you deny that the Lords of the Void whisper to you? Did you not surrender yourself to the shadows on Argus?
It seems the offer I bring has been anticipated and spurned. Very well. But before I leave, I have one request. It has been 1,000 years since I set eyes upon the Sunwell. May I visit it once again?
I advise against it. We cannot trust that she will not—
Whatever she has become, Illyria is a daughter of Quel'thelas. I will not deny her pilgrimage to our most sacred site. First Arcanist, you and your retinue would be welcome to join us.
I would consider it an honor to see the Sunwell, Lord Lamar. And I prefer that my friends call me Phalistra.
Romoth, kindly open the way for us. Please, follow me.
The sense of power is palpable. As potent as the Nightwell, but of a different nature.
The Sunwell was corrupted by our enemies, but a Naru's sacrifice purified its waters. Now, the essence of the light sustains us.
The Sunwell has changed, but its beauty remains. It has been so long.
Stay back!
What is happening?
This is why I demanded that Umbric and his radicals be exiled. Anyone who treats with the Void is a danger to the Sunwell.
I did not intend for my presence to—
Enough! We need to cleanse this corruption before the well is lost.
Silgrin, Valtois, aid the Regent Lord.
The vessel has been found.
It wants the Sunwell. Something seeks to open a rift into the chamber. If it comes through, we may lose the Sunwell.
I can close the rift, but I will need help.
Tell us what to do, and we will lend our strength.
The door opens. Yes. This should suit our needs.
Now! Focus your power with mine!
You only delay the inevitable. I will yet have my prize.
The Sunwell is secure. Your aid was invaluable, Phalistra. And yours, champion.
Guards! Seize this saboteur.
I will not be taken prisoner in my own homeland.
Enough! You will leave at once, Illyria. Accident or no, your presence poses a danger to Quel'thelas. Go back to Stormwind. Silvermoon is no longer your home.
There is darkness in those waters. Its powers quickly turn into portals. And while we were capable of pushing back the darkness here, who is to say what might happen in the future? Arcane, light, maybe a touch of void, a power source used several times to create a massive gateway, and soon it will yet have another part to play. But now, you're up to speed on the history and importance of the Sunwell. So, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Really hope you enjoyed the deep dive. If you did, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and until next time, see ya!